countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, it is now time for more of the Last Comic Shop!
We're opening up the shop to newbies to help them find their way underneath the comic book tent.
And we're keeping the lights on for the oldies that like their comic books mixed with social commentary and spun all together with all sorts of fun, crazy things.
Yeah!
Giant planet heads that are not ego.
There you go. Psycho nuns and planet heads.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's wonderful when we get to talk to Eisner Award-winning creators, and that's what we're doing on the Last Comic Shop today. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott. They did not win Eisners, and I talk to them all the time. So this week, I wanted to go outside the box and talk to people that won them. And that is Mark Russell, the wonderful writer of so many great things. If you go around the Last Comic Shop archives, you can find plenty of episodes featuring books that Mark Russell has written, such as
Superman Space Age.
Or
Fantastic Four Life Story.
Or
we did Snagglepuss on that old podcast.
I think we don't talk about that podcast. There's got to be. I thought there was one more. Go out there.
So wait, Chad, did you recommend the Lone Ranger book when we did Lone Ranger? Because we didn't do the Mark Russell Lone Ranger, but
that's true. I
did a Lone Ranger.
I've recommended it before, that's for sure, with Mark Russell and Bob Q. Also, I know I've talked about One Star Squadron that he did through DC. I've also talked about Second Coming. I didn't talk about the sequel to Second Coming or the third series for Second Coming, I don't think, but those are also really cool too. Mark Russell has a ton of great books out there. Wonder Twins. I love the Wonder Twins.
Yes, but let's not spend any more time just talking amongst us. Let's actually talk to Mark Russell. So let's fire up the Archive Rama 3000 and get him on the horn now.
Let me activate Chris Farley mode. Like, remember that time you wrote Wonder Twins? That was awesome.
I knew you'd have to get a Chris Farley quote.
Do we have like a secret word we can utter when Chad starts fangirling too much?
I think it'll be pretty obvious.
Bananas!
All right. Well, here we are on the Last Comic Shop, and we're talking with Mark Russell. Mark, thank you so much for calling in to the Last Comic Shop, buddy. How you been doing?
Doing good.
And we've been wanting to have you on this program for forever. I mean, Chad, how many books have we covered on the Last Comic Shop? Because you're a huge fan.
I am a huge fan. So we've done Superman Space Age, Fantastic Four Life Story, Not All Robots, and the old show we did Snagglepuss Chronicles.
Absolutely.
I've been a big fan. I keep advocating for us to do the Flintstones book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that oftentimes when we're on the Last Comic Shop, we like to talk to creators about their comic book journey, how they got maybe they were involved with comics, or what were the comics maybe they grew up with that may have then translated into how they write or draw. And what's your comic book story, Mark?
Well, I started out, reading like Mad Magazine when I was like 10, 11, 12. And for a long time, I thought, well, this is the only comic book that matters. But it wasn't until I got into college, I had a friend who was sort of my guide into the world of comics. And he's like, comics are very different now than when we were kids. And he sort of curated my reading. And so he gave me like V for Vendetta and Sandman and Martha Washington Goes to War. And so that became what I thought of comics were then. It's like, well, this is, it's actually a literary form. And then in the 90s, I sort of discovered indie comics. So like Too Much Coffee Man, Flaming Carrot, Madman, work of like Matt Groening and Linda Berry. That sort of became what I thought, okay, well, this is what the comics world is now. So I think all of those steps on the way from Mad Magazine to Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman to the indie comics of the 90s have all sort of informed the way I write. They've all sort of informed my sensibility and how I approach my own comics.
Heck yeah, from the fan perspective, you see the satirical, what me worry aspect of your work, along with, you managed to tackle a lot of really hard-hitting issues and like things you don't see normally dealt with in comic books, but you seem to do that. And, when you're at your best, you're having a lot of fun with it. I feel like.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about your Mad Magazine days. Because I was a fan of Mad Magazine when I was growing up too. Unfortunately, I didn't have any like more recent issues in the 80s. I had all these issues that my uncle had that were like from the late 60s, early 70s. So I didn't get a lot of the jokes. Like most of them were about Nixon, a parody and Vietnam, and
a parody of like Tom Jones or something.
Right, but there was that. Who was the guy that drew the superhero? Don Martin was the guy. It was like Doc Martens, like the shoes, except he was like.
But he did like the snappy comebacks, the stupid questions. And
right.
Like that.
But who is your favorite artist or writer from the Mad Magazine days? Like
Al Jaffe is probably the best, but personally, I really like everything Sergio did. I love the little comics in the margins of the Mad, but yeah, Al was amazing. Al was probably the funniest of all the Mad Magazine guys.
I was sincerely also a huge fan of Mad, so that's kind of cool. And to Chad's point, it does show that, like, again, your type of writing style, at least from a fan perspective, is all about kind of like how do you take on these really huge monumental issues without just coming out and saying. Like, using satire and sarcasm and kind of veiling these things, with allegory and things. It works. It's funny. It's sharp. It's poignant. It's great.
Sometimes it's veiled, and sometimes your characters name things like Red Flag, which was the best, and Wonder Twins.
So
that's one of the things I like about the writing the superhero comics is when they let me just sort of make up my own characters and throw them in there because I can give them cool names and underwhelming power sets. And I'm writing a comic right now with my friend Bryce Ingman, who's the one who sort of reintroduced me to comics in the 90s. And it's a sort of an homage to superheroes. It's called My Bad. And it's basically all these characters that we just created that just have like bizarre power sets or like sort of thinly veiled parodies of like actual superheroes.
Very cool.
So you went from being a comic book fan or a person that was taking all these steps, like, this is what comics are, and then this is what comics are, and then this is what comics are. And then you were like, how did you decide I'm going to be a comic book writer and like decide what my comics are, at least?
Well, I didn't really. I had always planned to just write prose. Thought I was going to be writing novels and nonfiction books and things like that. But I got a call from DC asking me if I would be interested in writing a comic book they were planning on doing running up to the 2016 election called Prez, where they were bringing back like a comic they had done for like 4 issues in 1973 about the first teenage president. They thought it'd be a good sort of election time thing. So I was intrigued by the call, so I said yes. And that was the first time I started writing a comic. And but I found it really worked with how my brain works, because the thing I hate writing in prose the most is like visual details and creating a scene with words. And it's much better to create a scene with pictures. Go figure. So writing a comic allowed me to dump all that onto the plate of some artist. And so I thought, well, this really works well. And that I tend to think visually when I'm writing stories. So it really sort of, I think I found my natural medium just by this lucky break and getting to write this one comic book.
That's awesome. And that led to your work on the Hanna-Barbera books, where you did the Flintstones and Snagglepuss. And what was that like? Because it's not just working with DC. You have a whole different set of people you've got to deal with. And the stuff you did was pretty radical in terms of, your take on those characters. How was that received in office?
Well, like I said, I was kind of a novice when it came to writing comics. I didn't really know what I was doing. And my reading background in comics was always sort of edgy stuff. I thought, well, this is what comics are, so this is how I'm going to write the Flintstones. I'm going to write it like this sort of my manifesto on where civilization went wrong. It didn't occur to me that that Hanna-Barbera might actually have a problem with that or have issues. But then after I turned in the first script, I got all these notes from Hanna-Barbera that were basically destroying what I had written. There were things like, you cannot mention a deity. Fred has to say yabba dabba do once an issue. The tone should be upbeat and there shouldn't be any talk about self-harm, And so I was, I was like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. This is kind of the opposite of what I had pitched. Marie Javins, my editor, said, well, don't worry about it. Just write the comic you're going to write. And her and Dan DiDio sort of thanked Hanna-Barbera for their input and said, but this is the way we're going. And that was the last I heard from them. And from then, that point on, it was just started like game on. I could write about whatever I wanted. The reviews were a little mixed at first. Like, not everybody was on board. And, I got a bunch of these, you've ruined my childhood type of comments.
I could see it was definitely a different take, so I
weird.
can see that.
No, I understand. It's sort of like, they were putting something in their mouth they thought was chocolate, and it turned out to be barbecue sauce. Like the off-putting. And I think also, it was just kind of weird to me, though, that people have that much invested in the Flintstones or anything. It's like I wrote 2 books about the Bible, and I got more pushback for what I did to the Flintstones.
I mean, don't mess with people's childhoods. We found that out. Like, nostalgia is like the most powerful. It can make people buy, $500 toys that they have no business as a 40-year-old man owning.
Oh, comics introduced me to the force of toxic nostalgia, which I'd never, had encountered before.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a thing. But once you were done, and the critical reception to both the Flintstones and Snagglepuss, it was a really great reception. Did you hear anything from Hanna-Barbera after that, or?
No, I never heard anything from Hanna-Barbera, but I think that, once the worm had sort of turned on the reception, and I think the hardest part with the Flintstones and with my work in general is just getting the people who would like it to take a chance on it. Because most people in their right mind are like, well, I'm not going to read a Flintstones comic. And so it takes a little while for it to find the people that would really enjoy it. But once they did, the overall reception for the comic turned around. I think it's been my writing philosophy since, is to just assume that the audience for this comic will find it eventually. That somebody picking up at random, or the people who enjoyed previous iterations of this character that I'm writing might not be on board with what I'm doing with it, but that's okay, because they've still got the old stuff they can enjoy and read, and I've got people who will enjoy this. They just need to be made aware of its existence.
I also wanted to ask, while we're in this section, you alluded to Second Coming, your miniseries. Actually, you're in the middle of the 3rd one currently, from Ahoy Comics. And one of my favorite parts of that book is in the very first series, there's a conversation between God and I think it's Sunstar up in heaven. Was that your idea, with all the restaurants that had moved on?
Yeah. For those who don't know, we was talking about the food court in heaven is populated with fast food chains that have closed down. So like there's a racks in the food court in heaven, and like a burger chef, and that was my idea. Put those in there. It was something one idea I had from the very beginning, even before I laid a single page down of Second Coming. That's a joke I wanted to put in there.
It's got to get Kenny Rogers Roasters in there.
Oh yeah.
So it's got to be a fringe benefit too, is like being able to be like, you know what? I'm going to include racks in my comic book. Why not? Was it hard picking which ones actually were there, or singling it down, or did you know, you knew your top 5? You were like, okay.
Yeah, I'm old enough that I knew a fair amount of them from firsthand experience. It's like, whatever happened to Arctic Circle, or Rax? I was genuinely bummed out when Rax went under, because I liked Rax.
Yeah. It was like a weird mix of Arby's, because you could get roast beef sandwiches, but you could also get regular hamburger.
I think that's what doomed them. They tried to do too much.
They were spreading themselves too thin.
Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane.
Right. They flew too close to the sun. It's like, it was a Dairy Queen, an Arby's, and a Burger King all in one.
Yeah, with a salad bar.
They had a mascot. I think it was an alligator and a cowboy hat. It was all over the place.
It was just, they were just going for broke, and I like that. I like that approach.
And it's going to lead into what we're going to be talking about after the break with Psychoverse. You've obviously done a lot of content and material that builds off of existing mythos and existing storylines, but you've done some stuff that's also original. Do you prefer one or the other?
Yeah, I prefer the original stuff just because I get to tell the story from beginning to end. But one thing I like about working with other properties that other people have created that I don't own is that it has a lot of cultural equity in the mind of the readers. So there's a lot of explanation I don't have to do, because everyone knows who Superman is. Everybody knows who the Flintstones are. So I can just start telling the story. I don't really need to explain who these people are or why you should care about them, which you do have to do when you are creating your own world.
Building on sort of what you've done with other properties, is there one that you felt was easier or harder? It was like writing for Superman was very easy because you can basically do whatever you want. He's just a big Boy Scout. Or Flintstones, obviously you said you got a lot of pushback from Hanna-Barbera. Did you get that on the Superman book that you wrote as well?
No, the Superman book got a pretty good reception, I think, just because most people who hate me knew to stay away from me by that point. And it's fair. I don't care. I mean, it's there's things I don't like either. I just don't read them. You enjoy what you enjoy.
That's
what
right.
I don't understand are the people who enjoy not enjoying. So.
Yeah, there's like a limited amount of time you have on.
Yeah, I
on
don't
this
understand
big
that.
blue world. Like, you should find better things than you do than just focus on things you don't like. Yeah,
like saying, these Raisinets are as bad or worse than the other 300 boxes of Raisinets I've eaten. What are you
now
doing?
let me
with
do
your
a
life?
YouTube video about it.
that's right.
Yeah. At that point, the problem is not with the Raisinets; it's with you. It's like you are just addicted to your misery.
My Raisinette manifesto.
Yeah, it was like that guy who was Trump's spokesman, Sean Spicer.
Oh yeah,
He had this like sort of vendetta against Dippin' Dots. He had like 100 tweets about Dippin' Dots, about how just like out of nowhere, like Dippin' Dots are not the ice cream of the future.
I have been there, sir. I have seen it.
It's not like Dippin' Dots was asking him his opinion of their ice cream.
I wonder how they got press passes in the White House. Those Dippin' Dots, man.
They made a powerful enemy by existing.
Oh, Lordy. All right, well, we're going to take first commercial break for today, and we will be right back with more of Mark Russell. We're going to be talking about Psychoverse from Humanoids, so stay tuned for that.
Hey, it's Mikey Wood, frequent Last Comic Shop guest and collector. And as a collector, I'm always in need of boards, bags, long boxes, and more to house all those comics. That's why I use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off my orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get me a discount on BCW's already low prices, but I know using LCSPOD at checkout is another way I can show my support to the Last Comic Shop podcast and their continuing mission to bring fans together under that big comic book tent. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's LCSPOD.
It was supposed to be a day at the beach. But for 4 friends, one wrong road will put them on a direct course to being the main course. Her name is Grandma Hazel, a chainsaw-wielding psychopathic cannibal, a beast of the backwoods with a body count higher than a bowl of blood-spattered Scotchmans. From the creators of Hocus Pocus, Grandma Chainsaw. Evil as a perm.
And we are back. We are talking with Mark Russell, and now we're going to dive into the Psychoverse, which is his exploration of the Incal. And Mark, why don't you give us a quick 10-cent synopsis of what this is and what we're going to be talking about for the next 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, well, those who know the Incal universe created by Jodorowsky and Moebius, it's this crazy futuristic sci-fi world where the ultimate power of the universe is this thing called the Incal, which is like the source of all things and created the universe. And my story is about how it came from this realm, which is a realm of pure spirit and imagination called the Psychoverse. And my concept is that before something is invented, before something is thought of, it exists purely in the Psychoverse. But then when you have an idea for something, when you invent something, it disappears from the Psychoverse and appears in our universe, which is the Matterverse. So my story is about the Psychoverse getting sick of these greedy people like us in the Matterverse, stealing everything from them by inventing it, and deciding to come back and take back the Incal and all the other stuff that we have taken from them.
Yeah, we took all their fork knives.
That fork knife was awesome. Was that was your idea, right? Like, you were like, you know what?
Yeah,
fork
I
knife,
legitimately, I want, if they do make those, and they should, I want some royalties.
It's so much more useful than a spork.
I've always wanted one of those. If I had a restaurant, that would be my hook. Mine would be the restaurant where you don't get a knife and a fork, you get a fork knife, which is a fork where the prong on the end is sharpened, the side of it's sharpened, so it works like a knife.
It's one of the first things I ever taught my kids when they were like cutting up like their pancakes. I'm like, you don't need a knife, you can just use the side of your fork. Yeah. It's serrated now. Now you're in business. Now
I don't know. I see the dangers here. You're going to need lots of like crazy glue to suture up people's tongues from all these fork knife accidents. And be careful.
Oh lordy! In speaking about Psychoverse, you worked on this with a variety of different folks. Chad, who did you work on it with?
So Yanick Paquette was the artist. Dave McCaig did colors, and Troy Pietieri on letters.
Oh, there you go. And I was going to ask, over the years, like a lot of really, really great artists have worked on the Incal series. Again, you mentioned Moebius. Also, Juan Jimenez, who did all of the Metabaron stuff, which is kind of crazy.
Phenomenal. I like the Metabaron stuff better than I like the Incal, and I love the Incal.
Yeah, I was just curious about like the artist on this book, because he's no slouch either. This is really good stuff, and so it seems like it's continuing a trend of really great artists working on the Incal series. Did you have any input on this artist that you were paired with on this, or did you talk with him? Like, how was the scripting process with him, I guess? Well,
one of the reasons why I signed up with Humanoids to do this, why I was excited to do it, not only because I love Incal and the chance to work in the Jodorowsky is a lifelong dream, but also just because Humanoids has such a great reputation of handling art and artists. They always get A-list artists and put out incredible artwork. So I trusted them to come up with some names, in their stable of people they would want to put on this project. But they suggested Yanick, who I'd worked with before, actually, on in DC's You're the Villain. I was familiar with Yanick, and he seemed like just a great choice for this because he has this sort of otherworldly imagination when he's drawing things. He can really sort of conceptualize them in a way that thinks outside the box. And I think also Dave McCaig needs a lot of credit because his colors are such a huge part of this book, and part of what makes it look so cosmic, because half of it takes place in the Psychoverse, this outer space and the skies and everything are colored differently than those on planets we're used to. So it looks like a completely different universe. And that's largely thanks to the colors that Dave put in it.
Right. Sort of the genesis of this. Did Humanoids come to you? Did you pitch them? Did you talk to Jodorowsky at all before? Or was it sort of like he allowed people to play in his universe?
I wish I had got a chance to talk to Jodorowsky. I would have loved that. But Mark Waid approached me. He was at the time editor-in-chief at Humanoids. He approached me and said, would you like to write something for the Incal-verse? And so the idea I came up with was the Psychoverse, which was based upon this idea from Schopenhauer that there are two universes. There's the universe in which we live, and then there's this spiritual universe of pure ideas, thoughts, and that human consciousness exists to provide a bridge between the two. And so all the thoughts, all the conceptions we have exist somewhere. They just don't exist in the material world until we create them. And so I wanted to use that as the starting point for this story about how the Incal came from this Psychoverse into our verse, and upset the balance of power between the two universes by coming to the Matterverse.
Well, my follow-up is more on the book itself, because I was loving the Psychoverse nuns, if you will, these
Psycho nuns,
these warrior women that came in, and then whenever they get into trouble, they kill themselves so they could go back to the Psychoverse.
Yeah, they've got a loophole in that when something is destroyed in the Matterverse, it goes to the Psychoverse. So all they have to do if they get in trouble is they can just destroy themselves, and they'll show up again in the Psychoverse.
But again, these Psychoverse nuns are they're victims of crimes against women within the Matterverse. That's how you become a psycho nun in the Psychoverse.
Right. When people die and they come into the Psychoverse, the appropriate judges are people who were oppressed and suffered in the Matterverse. These are the ones who should decide your fate once you go to the Psychoverse. And I wanted to introduce the Psycho nuns. It's not just as these, baddies or villains, but as people with a real perspective. As people who are there's a reason for what they're doing. and a rationale behind it. And, it's hard to say who the bad guy, or if there's even a villain in the story. It's just people with conflicting interests all wanting, the same thing, which is their own survival.
And I've always said that the best quote unquote villains are the ones that are the heroes of their own story, like the ones that are like they've got their own reasons for going about what they're going to be doing. And the Psychoverse fits that to a T, because again, they have, especially I'm just going to call it like a mother superior version of and she's there, and she even gets put on trial by her other Psychoverse nuns for her more like fanatical quest of hers. And she's the one that's like, no, like, I truly believe in my heart of hearts that this is the right course. And so I can stand up to like any sort of test that you put in front of me, because I really believe this is what we should be doing. And so that was because there were bugs eating her. There were bugs eating her.
No, they have for those who don't know what he's talking about, in this order of the Psycho Nuns, if there's a dispute and someone accuses you of heresy, you can be challenged to a trial of faith. And then basically whoever's faith is stronger in their religious beliefs wins. And the way they test your faith is that they put you both down on this wheel on the ground, and they pour these flesh-eating bugs onto you, and the bugs devour you. And the first person to like beg for it to stop is like their faith isn't as strong, and then they're killed. And so she has to survive a test of faith.
There you go. It's some more slight religious commentary, I think.
Yeah, and I think it really is about how where people go wrong in religion or in politics is not necessarily in the core of their beliefs, but in the fanaticism and their willingness to like ignore all ethical or factual contradictions to get what they want.
Right. There's always a moment in a Mark Russell book where you have those lines that just cut to the quick of what's going on. And I love when the Mother Superior nun is like, humans or intelligent life forms are the only ones that can talk themselves into lies. Like animals will see things for as they are, but
that's kind of the danger, is that we're so intelligent we can convince ourselves to do things that are utterly suicidal.
Well, I wanted to kind of piggyback on an earlier question that J.A. had again about this being like, in essence, a prequel to the Incal. And like, again, the Incal is such a famous book. John, I actually didn't think that John, who's the main character of the Incal, played a lot of a part in your particular book. It was actually more about the other characters, like the Meta Baron, like the Psychoverse nuns, the other characters. And John's there, and he's doing John things for folks that have read the Incal. But did you do that on purpose? Did you want to tell more of the background? Because you did like a lot about the Bergs, like their whole society and things like that.
John's kind of the object of the story rather than the subject, in that the story is talking about how he comes to be the one that possesses the Incal at the beginning of the Incal. And so it's not really that he's the main character. He's just one of several characters in the story that culminates in him getting the Incal without knowing it.
Yeah, just existing within that dumb luck.
Did you feel a lot of pressure doing this book, given like the history of the Incal and kind of like, again, we all know sometimes the word prequel is a dirty word around fandom. They're like, oh, we don't want to know how things are. Yeah. But this is like, the end of your book is John falling, and that's how the Incal starts. So, like,
spoilers.
Everybody. Any case, did you feel a lot of pressure with writing this?
You know what? I've only felt that pressure twice, where it's like, oh, geez, I better not screw this up, and that was with Superman Space Age in this book.
Okay.
Because there are things I loved, and I came into it, so I wasn't just like feeling I could just make it my own and do what I wanted with it. I felt like I had to give it the proper respect and work within the rules of the playground, which I usually don't do. And so, I did feel pressure. But I partly got around that by also creating the Psychoverse, which is my playground.
Yeah.
A playground within a playground.
Well, no, it was the right call too, because it gave you an entire other tapestry to work with that was your own. That was actually brilliant. Good for you, Mark.
And I was going to say, as a reader, I'm not familiar with the Incal or the Jodorowsky. My exposure is just the Jodorowsky's Dune, which was bananas. I saw that documentary. Yeah. But I struggled a little bit, I won't lie, initially. But by the third issue or so of this story, I'm like, oh, this is a Mark Russell book. I can see all the Mark Russell notes and things. Did you get more comfortable as the story was going on, like taking control of the wheel, or?
Yeah, and part of it is just I knew how it was going to end from the beginning, so I gave myself the license to, I understood people might not understand or might not be inured in what's happening at the beginning, but if they stick around, it will make sense.
There you go. Any advice for people like me that might not be as versed in the Incal, and how to best approach this universe or where to go next?
For those people that haven't read the Incal, do you feel like they have to read this before they read your book?
No, they don't have to. I think you'll probably get more out of it if you have read the Incal, but you could read it, without having read the Incal, and I think it makes sense. But I think those people who have read the Incal and love the Incal will get a lot more of the Easter eggs, or will understand more about the characters right off the bat. They won't have that initial sort of period of wondering what's going on or who these people are. They will get a lot of that much more quickly.
Yes, because I also haven't read the Incal, so I don't know if this exists in the Incal or if this is one of your creations. But I love the planet as a head concept of the two planets talking to each other. The one's like how's my beard coming in? But it's a forest essentially, and the idea that people would come together and they're like, okay, you are a perfect person to now run the planet. And when they're young, they're really good at running their own planet. But as they get older, they forget about the people that are living on their planet and they're just sort of doing their own thing.
Yeah, no, that was my idea. And it's like a metaphor I've had for a while that I wanted to work into it. That was, about like the problems with autocratic governments or, sort of dictatorships, is that even if you are this populist sort of beloved figure at the beginning, eventually you just get used to being Kanye West or whoever, you get used to being this sort of detached billionaire, and you forget what it was that you came to do. And I think that's what happens to these giant planet head people, where it's like the longer they spend as the planet and less as like a person, the more they begin to forget what the people on the planet actually need.
It's like Singapore, essentially.
Jeez. My goodness, we're getting deep. I just thought it was like Ego the Living Planet guy from Marvel. I was like, oh, it's a Jack Kirby thing. I like that. I dig that. Any case, we'll be right back after these commercial breaks. We're going to wrap it up with Mark, and he's going to be talking about some other project that he's working on, so stay tuned.
Greetings, ghouls and boils. I'm the Ghoul Master, a loving homage to horror anthology narrators of yesteryear. Wait, I'm an homage? Why didn't anybody tell me? You'll hear from my agent about this. But first, let's get to the heart of the matter. I'm here to tell you about the new horror anthology, Memoirs of the Morbid, on Kickstarter in time for Halloween. Memoirs of the Morbid is a black and white homage to classic horror comics from the 40s and 50s, containing 5 self-contained stories by some of the best indie comic creators out there. There's that word again. I better not find out homage is an insult. Anyways, Memoirs of the Morbid is completely done and ready to go to the printer. So don't make a grave mistake by missing it.
Hey, are you looking for your new favorite comic? Are you interested in epic fights, a career change, creating comics, and mental health? You have come to the right place. My name is Oscar Osorio, and up until a few months ago, I was working at a desk for a big company, until I burned out and decided to pursue my passion, comic books. It was the beginning of my new, better life. At least, that's what I thought. Turns out that doing what you love may involve newer mental health issues, worrying about getting money, feeling you're not enough, fear of disappointment, and more. So I combined these emotions with my love of superheroes and fan comics and turned it into my debut comic book, a never-ending adventure, the fantastic quest of an aspiring creator looking for an idea. Life on Soup, right now. So come with me as I embark on the never-ending adventure of creation.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and we're still talking with Mark Russell because we're enjoying it. That's what we like to do. Now, Mark, later on this week is the San Diego Comic-Con, and we have been talking about it for the last couple of weeks about, again, the fact that you are up for some awesome awards. Not only Best Writer for a multitude of books that you've written this year. Again, some of the ones you can go back to The Last Comic Shop and listen to our reviews of, like Superman Space Age. We did that book. And so I was curious, what is it like to be a part of all that Eisner buzz stuff, I guess?
No, it's exciting, because it's largely about the respect of the other people making comics, which is, means a lot to me because there's so many of these people that I love and respect. And it's kind of what I like best about San Diego, going to San Diego and that Comic-Con, is I get to see these people that I only maybe see once or maybe twice a year and get to hang out with them in a fun environment. The ceremony itself is kind of long. It's like usually 4 or 5 hours, so you have to sort of make yourself comfortable. But it's exhilarating when you win, which I say that like I won a ton of them, but I won one. It was exhilarating, but it's like you have to sort of go in assuming you're going to lose because there's so much talent, there's so many great things going on. But it's fun, regardless.
I was curious. Did you get to see Mike Deodato at last year's when you guys won for Not All Robots, or no?
No, he lives in Brazil, so he wasn't there. But I am going to CCXP in Brazil at the end of November, so I will meet him there.
Oh, nice! Because that was one of our favorite books, honestly. What's the story behind that? Like, why did you want to write Not All Robots? Like, where did that idea come from?
Well, it came during the Me Too movement when people were replying, "Well, not all men do this," which is like, well, yeah, of course, but it's not really a rebuttal to these women who have experienced sexual abuse. So I wanted to sort of write the Not All Robots as sort of a parable for toxic masculinity, about this world where the robots have all the jobs, they have all the money, and still somehow that's not enough for them. It's still they feel like victims because people are scared of them, and rightfully so, because every now and then one of the robots goes crazy and kills their family. And the humans live in fear of the robot who's now living in their house as the only person in the family who's allowed to have a job. And the robots live in resentment of the humans because it's now going to support this family it doesn't really care about. And so it really is kind of about the poison that is in human relationships, is when we see each other as economic roles and not as actual people. And this is what has created the division between robots and humans.
Wow. Deep stuff, Mark. Deep stuff.
Now, that book came out through AWA, and you mentioned earlier you have something else coming out through AWA pretty soon. Tell us a little bit about Rumpus Room.
Yeah, so Rumpus Room is my next title with AWA, and I'm really excited for it. Ramon Rosanas is doing the art on that. And it's about this billionaire who imprisons people who cross him in his rumpus room of his mansion. And one by one, he has them crushed and turned into this really magnificent skin cream, which is better than any skin cream you can get on the market because it's made with the flesh of victims.
Soylent Green is made out of people.
Yeah, exactly. But he the one sort of allowance he gives these people is he lets them vote on who the next person to be crushed is going to be.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
It comes out, I'm not sure what the exact pub date is, but it comes out in a few months.
Okay.
And I was going to say, too, I know you're very prolific with Ahoy Comics. Billionaire Island is wrapped up. I just finished that miniseries the other day. And then Second Coming is still coming out. Anything from Ahoy that fans should look out for? Or what's that
definitely.
Experience like?
I'm really excited about this, a book of stories I did about the cereal monsters, based upon like Count Chocula and Frankenberry. It's sort of like those monsters if they lived in sort of a Game of Thrones type universe.
Oh, man. Yes!
It's called Serial, and it's coming out on Ahoy. And for legal reasons, I couldn't actually, have Count Chocula or Frankenberry. So instead, I have the Marquis de Coco.
That almost sounds better. Does the Lucky Charms guy show up?
Yes, he's a big part of the story. He's called the Leprechaun King. And he has a crown that embodies the four what he calls the four wisdoms, which is the green clovers, the yellow moons, the pink diamonds, and he has like this whole philosophy behind what each one means, and a ruler has to master all four.
Mm-hmm.
Wow! And then add oats.
Yes,
yeah. The pieces that
guy shows up too. He's like a lawyer. Defends the Marquis de Coco when people accuse him of being a vampire.
This is going to be my favorite series of the entire year. I'm
the
sorry.
Tricks Rabbit?
You got other projects. Yeah. Whatever. I want the cereal book. That's what I want now. Because this is speaking my language.
Well, there you go. And we didn't bring up My Bad, which the second series of My Bad has come out through Ahoy. And then also you do work at the big two. Like you're just nominated for Superman Space Age. Anything coming up out of Marvel or DC that we need to be aware of?
I've got some things pitched with Marvel, but nothing approved yet. And there is something I've got going with DC, but it hasn't been announced, so I can't talk about it yet.
Okay. Oh, that's fine.
I'll let you know.
That's fine. But Mark has some work for all those DC fans out there. You might be seeing some more stuff from Mark, so your fingers crossed.
One Star Squadron 2. We need Wonder Twins 2 as well. I also love Wonder Twins.
Definitely. I would do that tomorrow if they allow.
I was so sad that movie never particularly.
Yeah. Although I don't think it would have had anything to do with my story, but I was looking forward to it.
Oh, that's a shame.
Did you always want to write a book about the Wonder Twins, or was that just like they pitched it to you?
I hadn't really thought about it. It was like Bendis when he was over at DC for the Wonder Comics. They allowed him like to create his own line, and he wanted to do like a line of teenage comic heroes, and one of the ones he wanted to do was Wonder Twins.
What was that like being tapped by Brian Bendis for his Wonder line? Because that's got to be an honor as well.
That was great. Yeah, I was very honored because he's like a legend, and he taught me a lot. Just a magnificent guy. So it was a dream working with him.
What was the other book? Did they do Dial H for Hero?
They did Dial H, yeah.
And Naomi.
Yeah, that was great.
So you didn't have like your pick of them, like you couldn't have done.
No, they offered me Wonder Twins, but to me, it's like Wonder Twins. It's rare for me to I get a superhero that I actually know a lot about. So
bucket of water.
I love the hockey rink stuff. that whole book was just wonderful.
Yeah, it was.
I think that those powers are underrated.
I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to all these really great books, Mark, and we're looking forward to maybe having you back on the show sometime in the future. So Thank you so much for joining us on The Last Comic Shop. Make sure that you're checking out all of Mark's wonderful stuff. Where can they find you, Mark, on a regular basis?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I probably won't be once the Blue Sky account comes through, but for now I'm on Twitter at Manruss, MANRUSS. And that's also my handle for Instagram. And I'm on Facebook.
There you go. And you can pick up Psychoverse from Humanoids. So make sure that you do. We really enjoyed it. And for folks that like that, you can also get the rest of the Incal universe through Humanoids. So it's a really great place to get all of that great stuff.
I highly recommend everything in the Jodorowsky.
Yes. So thank you so much for being on The Last Comic Shop, Mark, and we hope to see you soon, sir.
Thank you.
Until then, keep doing that great stuff that you be doing. All right. Well, that was great talking with Mark Russell. Fantastic. I hope he comes back to The Last Comic Shop. I really did enjoy talking with him, and I'm going to be looking forward to that serial epic. That
Tricks are for kids. I wonder when the rabbit shows up. I wonder if he's like high on LSD or something. The Tricks rabbit, you gotta believe is wrong with him.
I can't wait for the Oats lawyer.
Oh, or the Fruity Yummy Mummy. Everybody remembers that guy. It was just like they Fruit Brute, and they were like, "Nah, werewolves aren't cool anymore. We'll make mummies." What were some other iconic cereal mascots that you would like to see in this upcoming cereal book?
Tony the Tiger.
He's great.
Yeah, Fruit Loops, dude.
What about Smacks? Remember Smacks? Who names a cereal Smacks?
Or Cuckoo for Cocoa Pops? You could just have him. He'd just be like he was a drug addict.
They're all drug addicts. They're all high on their own high fructose supply.
Well, something we're hoping that you're addicted to is reading more comics. So we're going to give you some recommendations. Yes, these are other books that you can go to your local comic book shop and pick up in addition to Psychoverse by Mark Russell, as well as all the other wonderful Mark Russell books that we talked about on today's program.
Yes, that's right. In fact, mine might be found in the buck bin.
Ooh. Well, before we get to that one, let's go ahead and get to Chad.
Mine's totally off the wall. I'm going to go with The Marvel Vault.
Museum in a book.
Yes. It's actually super awesome. And I think I showed this to you, Andy, one time years ago. It has reproductions of sketch pages for the Submariner. They have cards that Bill Everett sent to his daughter when she was at camp. They have the Mary Marvel Marching Society, like membership card and the letter. they would send to kids. The No Prize book, which I actually have a copy of that regular size. The Marvel trading cards, the Marvel menu from when they had their restaurant. But it goes through their history and it has all these really cool pictures and these little pull-out reproductions of some awesome artifacts. But that's what I love. That's my romance that's gotten fat with me.
Well, something I love. And in fact, when I got it originally, I'm pretty sure I got it in a buck bin. Of course, a buck bin back then wasn't as good as a buck bin now. It was like a quarter bin back then. I don't know. Anyways, I am recommending this nice little 4-issue arc that runs from Silver Surfer Volume 3, number 40 through number 43. And this is when the Silver Surfer falls into Dynamo City and loses all his powers and has to get a job. He's not very good at anything because he's in this city where he's got this silver skin and everything that makes him overheat. It's a classic Jim Starlin. And the second issue of the 4-issue run has got the classic cover of the surfer in line to try to get a job.
Oh, man.
With all these different aliens, one-eyed things, all this different stuff by Ron Lim. It's a classic, fun. You almost want to say it's like a bubble episode, but it's 4 episodes. It's 4 issues long. So back when they used to stretch these things a bit, sometimes it takes place right before Infinity Gauntlet. It was like a reset, a sort of, okay, we're going to do something for a couple of issues with the Surfer before we get into the next 30 issues of Infinity Gauntlet that's coming up. And it's this fun little storyline where he's basically in a city that has sucked his power set off, so he can't do anything.
Wow! Why didn't he get a job as a lifeguard? You would think.
Oh, right.
It's just an idea. Any case, yeah, I remember you getting that, and I do remember that cover. What is that?
41.
Okay, yeah, that's a great cover. Great stuff by Ron Lim. That was a great pick.
Oh, and then one of the other issues, he ends up selling his memories, and he makes this deal, and he'll get all this money. He's like, "Oh, I can save so many people with all this money." But then they're like, "Okay, that'll be $5 for this, and $10 for that, and $6 for this, and $4 and this fee and that fee." And he ends up with less than he needs just for himself. He's like, "No, it's not my fault. You didn't have a lawyer."
Oh, wow. Well, that's a great summertime read. And speaking of summertime reads, my recommendation is also another one of my selections from my summertime reading list. Yes, these are great comic books that you can read by the pool or lake or whatever swimming place that you like to go. And it is a part of Bronze Age Hulk. I'm going to show my love for the Hulk. I've already recommended a couple other Hulk books just this year, including Hulk Gray and some other ones. But this one comes from the Bronze Age, which is probably my favorite time to be a Hulk fan because you had a lot of really great writers. And in fact, this particular collection, which I'm talking about, which is called Crisis on Counter Earth, is a collection of a wide variety of stories done by some terrific writers, including Steve Englehart, Roy Thomas, Jerry Conway, Archie Goodwin, Steve Gerber, Chris Claremont, and Tony Isabella. And it's all got that Herb Trimpe art, which is fantastic. Collection of the issues between 157 and about 178. So you get a lot of issues in this, almost omnibus level collection of issues. Although there aren't any really key issues among these runs, some of these issues are really my favorites, including Hate of the Harpy. That's where MODOK turns Betty Ross into the Harpy for the first time, gives her gamma powers and puts her against the Hulk. So you basically finally get that lover's quarrel between the Hulk and Betty Ross as the Harpy, and then they go up into the clouds and they fight a bunch of monsters. And I don't know, there's just a lot of great issues in there, including he fights with the Juggernaut in issue, and in particular the one that the title comes from, Crisis on Counter Earth, where for all those folks that know about the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie that just came out, this is where the Hulk actually goes to Counter Earth and meets Adam Warlock, which is kind of a really interesting story. So if you like just classic Hulk, go pick up Crisis on Counter-Earth in Epic Collection. And speaking of wonderful issues, make sure that you're checking out the Last Comic Shop podcast for all of the issues we're going to be talking about for the rest of the summer over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. Download all of them. We've got a tremendous back catalog of not only great comic book reviews, but also interviews with folks like Mark Russell, or you can go back and listen to some of our interviews we did at some Comic Cons, or with Dennis Culver and all kinds of great folks.
Russ Braun, remember Russ Braun?
Yeah, Russ. And if you're looking for great stuff to put your comic books in, make sure that you're getting all your bags and boxes and boards all over at bcwsupplies.com. It's a terrific place where you can get all of those wonderful things at 10% off if you use our promo code LCSPOD. Again, LCSPOD at checkout gets you 10% off all of that great comic book paraphernalia.
Okay. And if you need recommendations, obviously it's our Mark Russell show. Check out some of those Mark Russell books. Things like Wonder Twins, things like My Bad from Ahoy Comics, things like Second Coming. I could name him for days. He's a really prolific writer and does a really great job. To find our show, you can also head out on social media. We are on Twitter and YouTube and all of the rest of those places at Last Comic Shop. Or Jay, what else can they find there?
Polls on Thursdays usually, and we put you to bed at night. Well, most people go to bed. I am waking up with some Golden Age comic book covers. Of course, everything, all links, all our socials, all available on the website. That's the homepage. You can find all of our shows there as well. That's the lastcomicshoppodcast.com. We also have links to the merch store. If you want a t-shirt, you need a coffee mug, or a tote bag for the next time you are at a Comic-Con.
There you go. And until next week, I was the host of the most, Andy Larson. I'll be joined once again by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott as we recap San Diego Comic-Con and who won at the Eisners and the great news that came out of that awesome event. Here's hoping that Mark Russell brings home at least something, whether it's for Best Writer or for his work on Superman Space Age.
And maybe Psychoverse from Humanoid.
Yes, go make sure that you're picking up Psychoverse from Humanoids, like Chad said.
Oh, I can't stop. Bring me those psycho nuns to make them stop.
Until next week, did you ever find somebody that used to play the game Battleship? Most people think it's hit or miss.
You know it's bad when he starts laughing before he even tells the joke. Oh, that's horrible.
Mark Russell would enjoy it. He liked Max.
So who's the Meryl Streep of the Eisners?
The Last Comic Shop was a 2023 Black Angus production.